Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you. Pulp Fiction wasn't just a crime film, it was a cinematic earthquake that rewrote the rules of modern filmmaking. Behind the cool dialogue and non-linear storytelling was a production full of chaos, risks, and unbelievable behind-the-scenes stories. Tempers flared, accidents erupted, and Hollywood power dynamics were shattered. Today, we're revealing 20 shocking things you didn't know about Pulp Fiction, from dangerous stunts and hidden casting drama to production nightmares that nearly derailed it all. And wait until you hear the bonus fact, a secret so wild it changes how you see the entire movie. So buckle up because we're opening the case file on Tarantino's masterpiece. Let's dive in. The famous script was almost buried. Before Pulp Fiction became legendary, the script itself almost vanished into obscurity. Quentin Tarantino wrote it with Roger Avary, but no major studio wanted to gamble on its violence and fractured timeline. Miramax only bought it after a heated bidding war where other studios tried to bury the project, fearing it would flop. At one point, Tarantino even considered publishing it as a novel if Hollywood rejected him completely. What audiences didn't know, the very thing executives hated, the out-of-order storytelling, would become the film's genius signature. It wasn't safe, it wasn't neat, it was raw, risky, and revolutionary. Without Harvey Weinstein's controversial but aggressive backing, Pulp Fiction may have died on the page instead of shaking the world. John Travolta was not the first choice. John Travolta's career revival as Vincent Vega feels inevitable now. But originally, Tarantino wanted Michael Madsen, fresh off Reservoir Dogs, for the role. When Madsen chose Wyatt Earp instead, Travolta slid into the part. Even then, the studio resisted, thinking he was box office poison after a decade of flops. Travolta had to fight for the role, cutting his salary down to a modest $140,000. What no one expected, Travolta's dance scene with Uma Thurman would not only become iconic, but also completely rewrite his career. Not a safe casting, but a resurrection. Without Pulp Fiction, Travolta may have faded into obscurity instead of headlining blockbusters again. The adrenaline needle scene was filmed in reverse. One of the most shocking moments, Vincent Vega plunging a needle into Mia Wallace's chest, wasn't shot the way audiences think. To keep Uma Thurman safe, Travolta didn't actually stab down. Instead, the needle was already in her chest, and the scene was filmed in reverse as Travolta pulled it away. Played backward, it looks like a brutal thrust forward. Tarantino used practical effects instead of CGI, adding raw authenticity. The tension wasn't just cinematic, it was physical. The actors felt the danger in every take, knowing a single mistake could go very wrong, not a digital illusion, a trick of film, choreography, and risk. That realism is why the scene still shocks audiences today. Bruce Willis saved the film's finances. Bruce Willis didn't just play Butch, he may have saved Pulp Fiction from financial disaster. At the time, Miramax needed at least one big name to sell the film internationally. Willis, despite a few recent flops, was still a bankable star thanks to Die Hard. His signing allowed the movie to secure foreign distribution deals, which kept production afloat. Ironically, Willis took a pay cut to join the ensemble, but his presence gave the project credibility. The twist? His role was smaller than usual, but it gave him critical respect he hadn't had in years. What looked like a gamble became the film's safety net, and Bruce Willis was the insurance policy. Samuel L. Jackson nearly lost his role. Samuel L. Jackson's performance as Jules Winfield is so iconic it feels written for him, but he nearly lost the part after a disastrous audition. Another actor, Paul Calderon, impressed casting directors so much that Jackson's shot at Jules was slipping away. Furious, Jackson flew back to re-audition and delivered his monologue with such fire that the room reportedly went silent. Tarantino later said Jackson didn't just read for Jules, he became him. That second audition changed his life, cementing him as one of Hollywood's most powerful voices. Not luck, not chance, a rage, persistence, and one unforgettable read. Without it, Pulp Fiction's most quoted lines may have belonged to someone else. Uma Thurman almost refused the role. Uma Thurman as Mia Wallace feels like destiny, but she nearly turned it down. The script's intensity, particularly the heroin overdose scene, made her hesitate. Tarantino reportedly called her repeatedly, even reading the script to her over the phone until she agreed. He insisted she was the only actress who could balance mystery, danger, and vulnerability. Uma later admitted she didn't fully understand the script at first, but trusted Tarantino's passion. What audiences didn't know, without Thurman's agreement, the entire movie's chemistry could have collapsed. Not an easy yes, but a reluctant leap of faith that created one of cinema's most unforgettable femme fatales. The wallet really belonged to Tarantino. When Jules pulls out his wallet during the diner standoff, it reads, "Bad motherfucker, da hoyo e huashahar." That wasn't just a prop. It was Quentin Tarantino's personal wallet, one he used in real life. The director decided it was perfect for Jules, giving Samuel L. Jackson's character another layer of authenticity. It wasn't a studio design, it was part of Tarantino himself. This tiny detail became one of the film's most quoted pieces of merchandise, later sold in replicas worldwide. Not just a wallet, a director's private joke, slipped into one of cinema's most explosive scenes, forever fusing Tarantino's personality with his characters. The diner scene took day to shoot. The film's finale, the diner standoff between Jules, Vincent, and Pumpkin, looks tight and explosive. In reality, it took several exhausting days to film. Tarantino insisted on precise blocking, constant close-ups, and rehearsed improvisation. The crew had to reset food plates, coffee cups, and cash registers countless times to maintain continuity. Actors recalled the tension wasn't just scripted, it was real. Hungry, tired, and emotionally drained, the cast began snapping at each other between takes. But the payoff was a scene layered with urgency and realism. Not a quick shoot, a grueling test of endurance that delivered one of cinema's most electric final sequences. The dance contest was inspired by 1950s Europe. The twist contest at Jack Rabbit Slim's isn't just quirky. Tarantino based it on old European dance competitions he'd seen in French and Italian films of the 1950s and 60s. He wanted Travolta and Thurman to channel that playful, strange energy. What audiences didn't realize, Travolta choreographed much of his own moves, pulling from his Saturday Night Fever roots, while Thurman added her own touches. The result wasn't slick. It was awkward, cool, and strangely intimate. Not a polished dance routine, a living, breathing moment that turned into one of the most iconic dance sequences in movie history. Tarantino hid cocaine in the heroin scene. When Vincent Vega snorts heroin, audiences see him scoop it out of a plastic bag. In reality, the substance was powdered milk. But Tarantino wanted the movements to look authentic. To teach Travolta how to act high, he reportedly had him research drug users and even lie on the floor at home, pretending to be stoned while his wife poured wine. The kicker? Tarantino also admitted he sprinkled real cocaine on set, not to be used, but as a reference for how it looked and behaved. That attention to detail made the scene feel raw and unsettling. Not real drugs, but dangerously close to reality. And before we move on to the next wild detail, go ahead and like and subscribe because the secrets only get darker from here. The film was shot on a tight budget. Despite its slick look, Pulp Fiction was made for just $8 million. Half of that budget went to paying the cast, leaving very little for production design and locations. Tarantino and his crew had to improvise constantly. For example, Jack Rabbit Slim's wasn't a real restaurant, it was a set built in a warehouse. The cramped shooting schedule meant long nights, minimal retakes, and heavy reliance on dialogue rather than costly effects. Not a Hollywood luxury production, but a guerrilla effort dressed up as a masterpiece. That resourcefulness gave the film a raw, independent edge that audiences didn't even realize they were watching. Harvey Keitel played more than just the wolf. Keitel's character, Winston Wolfe, solves problems on screen. Off-screen, Keitel played a similar role during production. A longtime supporter of Tarantino, he not only helped secure financing but also coached younger cast members during tough shoots. He was the film's anchor, keeping things professional when chaos threatened to overwhelm the set. Tarantino even credited Keitel with helping him learn how to manage actors, not just a role, a real-life fixer who kept the production from collapsing. Without Keitel's influence, Pulp Fiction might have unraveled long before the cameras stopped rolling. The overdose scene gave Uma Thurman panic attacks. Uma Thurman later revealed that shooting the overdose sequence was one of the hardest moments of her career. Lying motionless on the floor for hours, with wires attached to her body and cameras pressing close, triggered genuine panic. The crew had to stop multiple times so she could calm her breathing. Tarantino pushed her to capture authentic terror, which left Thurman shaken long after the shoot. Not just a performance, a genuine brush with fear that bled into the character. What audiences didn't know, her vulnerability in that moment wasn't just acting, it was lived experience. The famous briefcase still has no official answer. Fans have obsessed for decades over what's inside the glowing briefcase. Gold? Diamonds? Marcellus Wallace's soul? Tarantino has never given a definitive answer. In reality, the glow was just created by a simple light bulb hidden inside. Tarantino once admitted the mystery was intentional. What mattered was how characters reacted to it, not what it actually contained. Not a treasure, not an object, a symbol of desire, greed, and obsession. The unanswered question turned into one of cinema's most famous enigmas, sparking endless debates and theories. The truth? The mystery was the point all along. Tarantino's own car was stolen after filming. The red 1964 Chevy Malibu that Vincent Vega drives, that was Tarantino's personal car. Just after filming Wrapped, it was stolen and vanished for almost 2 decades. Rumors swirled around Hollywood about what happened to it. In 2013, police finally recovered the car in Oakland, California, after it resurfaced during an unrelated investigation. Not just a prop, a piece of Tarantino's life that disappeared into legend before finding its way back. That theft added another bizarre layer to the film's mythology, proving that Pulp Fiction's chaos wasn't confined to the screen. Christopher Walken's monologue was filmed in one take. The unforgettable scene where Captain Coons delivers the gold watch story to young Butch was done almost entirely in one take. Walken arrived on set, nailed the monologue, and left the crew stunned. Tarantino later admitted he barely directed the scene at all, he just let Walken's rhythm carry it. What audiences didn't know, the entire scene was almost cut for time, but test audiences loved it so much it became untouchable. Not filler, not expendable, a bizarre, hypnotic performance that injected absurd comedy into the film's darkest lineage of violence and legacy. Vincent and Jules were almost written as minor characters. Originally, Vincent Vega and Jules Winfield weren't supposed to dominate the movie. Tarantino's earliest drafts split the story more evenly among Butch, Pumpkin, and Honey Bunny. But as Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta developed chemistry on set, Tarantino began expanding their dialogue-heavy scenes, their car conversations, filled with royale with cheese jokes and philosophical debates, weren't major set pieces at first. But the improvisation was so good, Tarantino elevated them to the film's moral center. Not minor henchmen, not background muscle, but living, breathing philosophers who shaped the movie's entire heartbeat. The film was booed at its Cannes screening, then won. Pulp Fiction shocked the world when it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 1994, But what audiences don't know, its very first screening was polarizing. Some critics booed at the violence, others walked out in disgust. Yet as the days passed, the film's reputation built momentum, culminating in a standing ovation by the Time Awards were announced. Not universal praise at first, a brutal divide, but the boldness couldn't be ignored, and when Pulp Fiction won, it cemented Tarantino as the enfant terrible of cinema. The boos became part of its legend, the sound of cinema being disrupted in real time. Marvin's death was almost cut for tone. The infamous moment when Vincent accidentally shoots Marvin in the face wasn't universally loved during test screenings. Some executives worried the shocking mix of gore and comedy would alienate audiences. Tarantino refused to cut it, arguing the sudden absurdity was essential to the film's rhythm. He wanted violence to feel random, jarring, and darkly funny. Not sanitized Hollywood violence, not predictable buildups, but chaos erupting out of nowhere. That refusal to compromise gave Pulp Fiction its trademark unpredictability. Today, Marvin's death remains one of the most discussed and shocking moments in modern film. The film resurrected independent cinema. By 1994, Hollywood was dominated by expensive blockbusters. Pulp Fiction broke that mold, proving that dialogue-driven, independently styled films could conquer the box office. With a budget of $8 million, it grossed over $200 million worldwide, igniting the careers of countless indie filmmakers who followed. Studios suddenly scrambled to find the next Tarantino, not a one-off hit, a seismic shift. What audiences didn't know, Pulp Fiction wasn't just entertainment, it reshaped the business of cinema, opening doors for bold voices and risky storytelling for decades to come. The film's structure was inspired by crime novels, not cinema. Most people assume Tarantino's non-linear structure came from French New Wave cinema. But the deeper truth is stranger. He borrowed it from cheap crime novels he devoured while working at a video store. These pulp paperbacks often jumped between timelines, forcing readers to piece the story together. Tarantino applied that structure to film, creating something audiences hadn't seen before. Not just Goddard, not just cool editing tricks, but dime store novels elevated to high art. That hidden inspiration explains the title itself. Pulp Fiction? The film didn't just honor cinema, it smuggled the raw grit of paperback crime into Hollywood's bloodstream. Pulp Fiction wasn't just a movie, it was a revolution. It blurred the line between indie grit and mainstream success, turning forgotten stars into icons and rewriting the language of film. Behind the cameras, chaos, danger, and obsession fueled every frame. On screen, it became a timeless classic. If you enjoyed uncovering these shocking truths, subscribe and share this video. And remember, in Tarantino's world, even the smallest detail can change everything.